Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I want to talk to you about thornless roses because sometimes you're going to put them in a position in your garden where you're up close and personal, like let's say beside a pathway or through an archway, where you really don't want to be rubbing up against thorns. Now, I can't promise you that the ones I'm recommending in this video have zero thorns, but they are thornless, or let's say call them lightly armed, meaning they don't have a lot of prickles on them. While I do this, I'm going to put up on the screen, say, a picture and a profile of the plant while I talk about it. Like this one here is called Barcarolle. It's a velvety red rose with a decent scent, hardy to zone 6. I'm going to try to get some of that biographical information up on the screen so you can read along and I can go through the choices a little bit quicker. This is not an exhaustive list, so if you are watching this, you're a rose person, and you've grown something that is either thornless or relatively free of thorns, go ahead and drop those in the comments of the video. That'll help other people out. Let me start with a couple of choices on the smaller end. So Pretty Polly White is bred from the polyantha roses, which are very compact. The one we're talking about here is up to about 3 feet high and makes a really compact, dense shrub with lots of flowers on it all season in white. Also in white, and a compact choice, is Iceberg, although it tends to have a bit of a looser or more open habit. Iceberg has been on the market for many decades now, and it also has sported off to different colors. So there's the white iceberg, which is classic, but it also has the brilliant pink iceberg, the burgundy iceberg. It is one of the first things in bloom in my garden and one of the last things to wrap up in the year. Can't say it's completely free of black spot or other foliar diseases, but it doesn't seem to slow down the performance, and it's just a fantastic garden shrub. Next, I want to talk about Sophie's Perpetual, which is a found rose presumed to be a Bourbon or early cross between the Chinas and the Damasks. And I can see that because from the China side, it gets petals that darken as the blooms age and also reblooming characteristics. And on the Damask side, it has that wonderful fragrance, spicy, perfect, like old rose perfume. And it has a charming habit in the landscape. Again, thornless, and has long, graceful stems that seem to pop up everywhere in between other perennials and shrubs as I use it in the garden. The next one I want to talk about is Sterling Silver. And Sterling Silver is still one of the most popular mauve or lavender roses. It may have been superseded in terms of vigor by other newer selections like Neptune or Le Petit Prince, but is still an excellent choice for fragrance, really strong fragrance, and again, thornless. One of the better hybrid teas that you'll find that has the thornless characteristic is a rose called New Zealand. It's a McGreedy rose in soft pink, upright, big blooms, lots of fragrance, and it has the bonus of having a color sport. So New Zealand is in pink, but Full Sail is in white, and they're identical except for their color. Let me mention two older garden roses that come in either shrub size or climbing sports. The first one I want to talk about is Souvenir de la Malmaison, which is in a soft pink through cream. Fantastic old romantic rose, and again comes in a shrub size or a climbing sport, so you've got to be sure which one you're buying at the same time. The other one, same thing, Cecil Brunner, which makes a small garden shrub in the shrub size, but a rampant rambler or climber in its larger size with beautiful tight, almost tea-looking pink flowers. Speaking of old-fashioned style blooms, I may as well throw in a few David Austin roses here, which again are not perfectly thornless, but are lightly armed enough that you can consider them so in the garden. First one I will mention is a Shropshire Lad in deeper pink. We have Heritage, which is in a much softer pink, and great fragrance on that one. And then I'll mention also, to widen the color range, Moulnier in a golden yellow. I have 3 of the historic, romantic, old garden roses of Europe to add to the list here, and they are once bloomers, but well worth having in the garden. The first of which is called Chloris, which is a large shrub with pale pink flowers, but the real star is the fragrance, which, if you're familiar with the perfume, the rose perfume, this has a different and I would say more refined, even nicer scent than that. So wonderful and worth having in the garden. Second one is called Madame Plantier, which just loads down its arching stems with small white blooms with a green center eye. Very, very charming. Looks like Madame Hardy, but just smaller blooms and thornless, of course. And the final one I wanted to talk about is Belle de Crécy, which I admit is not a color for everybody. Somewhere between purple and pink. Very loud, but wonderfully scented, once blooming, blooms in a big cluster, and again, wonderful looking shrub to have in the garden. Let's move on to the climbers now, and the first of which is the most famous thornless climber, a bourbon rose called Zephyrine Druhin, which has, again, beautifully formed, high-centered blooms in bright pink, great scent, and the only downside is it's a little bit susceptible to disease. I don't grow it in my climate because of that. We're in a black spot region, but if you can give it some babying, it's a wonderful rose to grow. The second one I wanted to talk about is John Davis, and John Davis is in mid-pink, and this is a super hardy rose from the Canadian Explorer series of roses, and check out its cane hardiness. I think it's down to about zone 3. Next climber up is called Malvern Hills. This is a David Austin climber. Now, it is not entirely free of thorns, but it's smooth enough that I put it up on my own archway in my garden and have not regretted the decision. Charming flowers in shades of yellow. Reminds me a lot of Alistair Stella Grey, which I think is a noisette or something along those lines. Very charming, really nice looking rose. And while I'm talking about charming roses, one I've mentioned before, Guylaine de Félagonde, which sort of bridges the gap between a climber and a rambler because it is repeat blooming, and it has these apricot buds and clusters of flowers that are just really, really showy in the garden. So I can definitely recommend that one for a thornless rose. I want to finish out on a couple of the large growing, once blooming ramblers. The first one is called Blue Magenta, which is just striking in its deep burgundy flowers. Really interesting for a rambler. And finally, Lady Banks Yellow. The Lady Banks rose, of course, is a monster, grows very, very large, but thornlessly. So some of the largest specimens of roses in the world are Lady Banks, and I'll show you a picture of that one as well. I want to finish out the video by thanking you for your attention, and of course, if you've added anything to the comments of your suggestions, I'd like you to thank you for that as well. And maybe just a quick discussion on why it is that they don't breed thornlessness into every rose. And the answer to this comes down to the fact that there are competing breeding goals. So sometimes when they breed for large flowers or color, they lose the fragrance, or if they're breeding for fragrance, they lose the disease resistance. If you had to limit your breeding down to roses that are thornless, you would dramatically limit the gene pool of roses that you can breed from, and you might lose other things like vigor or disease resistance along the way. So you actually have, out of many thousands of roses on the market, you just have a few dozen that have that trait of thornlessness, and I've tried to give you some of the best ones today. All right, thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please drop those into the comments below the video, and I'll see what I can do to help.